information that will help you write good proposals that will win. But, you know, it's homework on their part, you know, because if you look at the agency website, see what's being funded, those kind of things, that'll all help you. Okay. I just want to talk a little bit about this because it's a government requirement. They have to conduct market research. So the reason why I'm telling you about this is I don't want you to get your hopes up. They could call you and say, what would you charge us if we wanted this done? And you could either give them a quote over the phone, or you could write a quote out and send it to them. They're not doing that to make an award decision. All they're trying to do is have you help them with their homework. And contracting officers get in trouble for this from the head of contracting authority, because it makes it look like to you, like let's say for example I'm a contracting officer and I call you up and I say, hey, what's your price for something? And then you give it to me and I'm like, okay, thank you very much. I call you up 2 days later, what if I added this, this, and this to it? What would your price be? And you give me prices for this. And then I call you the 3rd time. And now you're saying to your manager, oh, you know, NIH is really interested in me. They've called me 3 times and, you know, they want all this detail and they must love us, you know, because they're really getting all the detail. The answer is no, they don't love you. All they're trying to do is meet this requirement for market research. So don't get your hopes up for this kind of thing. There have been situations that I've had in my own company where they've called me up and asked me for pricing, and 2 days later I had a contract action in my mailbox. So it does happen, but just balance that because this is the real issue that they're trying to get to. And the reason why they have to conduct market research is to see if there are companies out there that can do what they need. So think about R&D. Does this technology even exist? How could it be incorporated at the component level? What are the what they're really trying to get a sense of is how you commercially sell your stuff. Like, do you sell it with a year's worth of maintenance? Is that your normal practice? Do you sell it with training manuals? Do you sell it with a training class provided? What are your commercial practices? Because what they're going to try to do is to write an RFP that mirrors your commercial practices. Because chances are, if they're your commercial practices, your competitors are doing something very similar. So they're trying to write this so that it looks like what you normally do. Sometimes they're highly successful, sometimes not so much, but that's what they're trying. How do you produce, distribute, and support the commercial items? Like, what kind of contract types do you typically get into? What are your terms for warranty? Any kind of buyer financing, maintenance and packaging, anything like that. Do you use any recovered materials that promote energy conservation and efficiency? You know, because that's going to help them meet their green objectives. So they might ask you questions like that. Whether bundling is necessary or justified. So let's say, for example, this training room did not exist, but we need it to exist. So as a contracting officer, one of the first decisions I have to make is, do I want to buy the lights from a lighting manufacturer and the tables from a furniture manufacturer and all the computers from an IT manufacturer and the AV from an AV manufacturer? So what do you see as an issue if I do that? What are the pros or cons?
You put up 4 RFPs to get that.
4 separate RFPs.
Versus go to one prime to get him to do it.
Right. So I still have to write all the requirements down, but it's up to the prime to be like the general contractor to manage all that. So in terms of my effort, am I managing 1 contractor or 4 or 5? And so that's what bundling is. I have to decide whether my requirements are close enough that it makes sense to bundle them all together, and whether that's normal practice to buy it that way, or whether I should buy things separately. And this becomes critical later on when we start talking about changes to the contract. Because let's say, for example, you want me to paint 10 classrooms. And so I bid on that RFP and I win, and I now have a contract to paint 10 classrooms. And let's say you're like, well, you know what? That whole side of the building needs to be painted too. So it's really, let's make the contract like 40 classrooms. Now all of a sudden, you have an issue. Because as a small business, 10 classrooms is purely within my bandwidth. But when you start talking 40 or 50 classes, large paint companies may decide to get in that. So large companies can protest after the fact and say, you weren't clear with your requirements from the get-go, because the fact that the original contract was 10, and now you're talking about adding 40 more, that's just beyond the scope of the contract. So that can be protested. So the government really has to think long and hard about what they're doing. I'll give you an example. The State Department asked me to come in and help them develop a source selection plan. And it was called the HART system, just like the HART. And what it was designed to do is that, you know, when you go through custom, when you come into the country or leave the country, they check your passport. And because flights are boarding, that has to happen within seconds, right? Because if it took a couple minutes, you know, air traffic control would be all over stuff. So then, but if you're applying for a passport the first time, you send in all your stuff, you go for your interview at the post office, you give them all your stuff, and you know, it takes about 6 weeks before, so that's a much longer time frame. So the system that will help you with passports and will help you when you go through air traffic, or go through air security at the airport, it's the same system that it's bouncing up against, but here it has to be really quick response time, and here it has to be slower. And of course, you know, we all know we live in a crazy time right now, and so they're trying to get state agencies to be able to tap in. So what State Department was struggling with is anybody who does IT knows that you would like to know what the full system is going to look like, because you've designed differently when you know what the full system is than if you're doing it piece by piece by piece. You can make some bad decisions if you were doing it piece by piece that would harm you in the long run. So ideally, you would like to know what this big picture is. But from state's position, they don't want to, because RFPs now are on the web and anybody can access them, including bad actors, they don't want to share too much about what their overall game plan is. So they're struggling with this bundling issue. How much do I tell the contractors about what we're really doing here, so that I allow contractors to make the best solution decisions without giving away too much to bad actors. Okay. So now what they fundamentally do is they finalize their source selection criteria. So they know ahead of time exactly how they're going to evaluate all the proposals. They finalize the RFP based on the results of all this market research we just talked about. They determine if they have to issue a draft RFP first. You know, the Constitution has been around for a long time. Agencies have been around for a long time. A lot of these requirements have been around for a long time. And you can go out today and find out who are all the incoming contractors. You can go to usaspending.gov and you can find all your competitors in your NAICS code, in the agencies you want to go to. You can even find out like contract end dates. Why do you want to know a contract end date?
It's going to be republished for RFPs, so you've had a chance to get it.
You have a chance to get it once it's up for recompete. So these are all useful pieces of information that you can get to. So sometimes when it's buying the same old, they probably just go to a straight RFP. But if it's a brand new requirement, like for cloud computing or for whatever, they will come up with a draft RFP document first, and they will post it on FedBizOps so that you can review it. And why would they do that?
Get comments back so you can fine tune it.
Exactly. So if there are problems with it, with their RFP document, you bring them to their attention. You say there's a disconnect between what you're saying in section C and what you're saying in section F over here. And then they can correct all those errors and submit the final RFP that everybody will bid on. Sometimes they don't post the whole RFP as a draft. Sometimes they just post section C, or maybe a task order. to just show you what kind of work is and whether or not you understand. How would you bid on this? So that's what gets posted. And then they come up with a plan for reviewing and responding to written bidders' questions. So you can't call the contracting officer up and say, I don't understand section C.1.4. They won't answer you. Instead, you have to submit it in writing, and oftentimes it's good to provide the government with what you would prefer the language to be. So the contractor seeks to understand section requirement of RFP section C.1.4. Does the government intend the wording to be umpity squat, or does the government intend the wording to be umpity squat? That way, you're keeping it easy for the evaluator. They have two choices to make, and then you get your answer. Because what you don't want to do is just ask the question open-endedly, because if they answer it and you're still not clear, you haven't gotten anywhere, and now your question period is over. So you want to, I use the term idiot-proof, like make it as simple as possible to tell the government what you need to know, so that when they answer it, you get what you need to know to be able to go forward. They also conduct typically a bidders conference, and these are useful for you to make the trek up to Washington, because you will see all your competitors there, and you'll also see, if you don't have the wherewithal to prime the deal, you could subcontract the deal to any other companies that was there. You can also review any requested bidders changes, and then you can they update, review. So they go through all your questions, and they decide which ones they're going to accept, how they're going to respond to each. And then they review, or update, review, approve, and then publish the RFP. And then that becomes the final RFP that gets posted on the bid results. And then if they need to make any other changes to it, they will make amendments to the RFP. Your key thing is that you have to be on the latest revision number when you submit the proposal. So let's say, for example, the government says, we're giving you attachment 1, and this is how we want to see your prices. And it says revision 1 on the RFP pricing sheet. But let's say they come up with a revision 2, and you're using a revision 1 sheet, you are not compliant. And companies get kicked out for things like that. Because even though they may have not made any changes to that pricing sheet, the changes were elsewhere in the RFP, you have to use the most current version of the entire RFP. Are you excited about federal business still? Huh? No one laughed. That's a good sign.
Just flip it to the off and back on.
All right.
And then you go like this.
You know, a lot of the stuff that you're going after is very niche market type stuff, so you're going to have fewer bidders going after your type of work. But for some of these, like if you talk about IT services, they could have 100 bidders, 100 people submitting proposals. So they have to sort of get their head around logistics. You know, where are they going to actually bring in all the proposals? Where are they going to evaluate them? And there are some seedy contractors out there. So part of my taxpayer need when I teach in the government agencies is to tell them, the companies that are trying to win this business from you are sneaky little devils. Not all of them. You know, most of us are legitimate, honest business people. But I'll give you an example. Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services is located up in one of the suburbs of Baltimore. And they're in a huge building, and they share a parking lot with like a strip shopping center that has a Panera Bread in it. There are companies that will have people go to Panera Bread and sit in a booth to see if anybody who is conducting source selection comes into the Panera to talk about it at the lunch break so that they can get insider information. There are companies that position people in elevators to just happen to be riding up and down to see if anybody happens to mention something about source selection. There are companies that will tell their people, we all know the feds leave at 4:30, go walk around people's desks and see if anybody left source selection stuff out. Because as contractors, it's not ethical, but we see why companies would do that, right? Because you spend a lot of money on these art proposal kind of efforts, and you really want to win, and some people resort to unethical type behavior to win. These government agencies, they're not thinking like that. They're mission focused. They're not thinking about this competitive side of the house. And so they can very easily fall prey to some unscrupulous contractors. How many people have seen the movie War Dogs? I'm telling you, is it on Netflix? It was on the plane yesterday. Do you know if it's on Netflix? Or is it on any streaming?
It's on Netflix, I'm sure, but I haven't watched it there.
Yeah, War Dogs it's the new one, and it's with Miles Teller and who's the funny I can't think of his name. The other guy. Jonah Hill. Watch it. It's all about procurement and how slimy this company was to go after federal business. Basically, everything I'm teaching you in this class.
Jonah Hill, Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, oh, Bradley Cooper. Ladies, Bradley Cooper. Did I say more? Ladies, Bradley Cooper. He doesn't look as hot in this movie as he does in other ones because he's like a bad guy, but Bradley Cooper. The movie is great because it points out what some of these unscrupulous practices are. For example, they call up their competitor, and they say, I'm the government contracting officer for this deal you're going after, and I need to give my boss just a rough order of magnitude estimate about how much this is going to be. What are you going to bid? And these companies think they're talking to the government, and they tell them. Throughout the movie, they do phenomenal things, and it's really worth kind of watching it just to get your head in the game. These guys got away with so much, and it wasn't until the very last one nuance of the government that got them caught. And they were in jail, and they'll be out within like a year now. And this was an actual company, these were actual people that did what they did. And it was really ironic because I taught this class, and I use it as a case example when I teach these classes. And there was a guy in my class who was actually part of that. Like, he was in Afghanistan when the stuff was coming in, where the bullets were all not marked correctly. And he brought in like his iPad with pictures, proof of all the stuff that would have happened in the movie. Like, he was the actual government official that was dealing with this company. So, really worthwhile.
I think I heard homework. We're watching War Dogs tonight for homework.
I think that you need to. It's a funny movie, you'll enjoy it,
Yeah.
but it also drives home a lot of stuff. Okay, so the important thing on this slide is that they couldn't make the award at this moment. You just turned in your initial proposal, they can make an award decision and be done with it. That's why you have to make sure you have a perfect proposal going in. If they don't make an award decision, then we get into the optional activities, and those are these things. So the first thing they do is they review your proposal in detail. If I'm the maintenance person, I'm reviewing all your maintenance stuff, somebody else is reviewing all your training. And anything that we feel that there's a disconnect between what you've responded and what our requirements are, we can issue you a clarification report. Please clarify, in section 2 you talked about version 4.2, and in section 5 you talked about version 4.3, which is it? Strictly a clarification. Or, we've reviewed your response to requirement 1-7.2, and we don't even feel you're close. Like, we have no idea what you proposed. Like, this just doesn't seem to match at all. Please explain. Right now, that's sufficient. Do you need water?
No, I'm good.
No, you're not.
Not good.
You need something stronger?
How many beer in the back row there? So when they issue a clarification or deficiency report, you have to come back and respond to that clarification or deficiency, and you have to update your proposal with the new information. They require that. So then they review your responses to that. There are also some audits that can occur pre-award. So they can come in and conduct a site visit, a pre-award survey. They can do a financial audit. Whether or not you're a responsible company, responsible meaning there are FAR requirements for being a responsible contractor, they can audit you on things like that, your cost estimating system. So those kinds of audits can get initiated